this thing on? Because it's getting ready to be on.
Hello everybody and welcome to Bell Ringer. My name is Greg. Your guest name today is Nick Kosinski from Odoo. Odoo is a software and tech company. Their US headquarters is in San Francisco, and they just opened their East Coast headquarters here in Buffalo in Seneca One Tower. Nick is a Buffalo expat and is coming back home with the operation. And throughout this podcast, he really clearly and eloquently lays out the business case for Buffalo, why they thought it was a good fit, and what he had to do to convince leadership. Thanks for listening. So for those that don't know, what is Odoo?
Good question. The question that everyone begs an answer to. What is Odoo? So Odoo is a business management software that is designed exclusively, right, to be super simple to use and to incorporate all the different aspects of the business that need to be managed via software into one solution. So we help businesses that, right, traditionally, would need an API in order to connect two or more pieces of software in order to aggregate data into one silo, we'll call it, and then to advance reporting and things like that around it. But with Odoo, you don't have to worry about connecting disparate systems that operate according to their same logic, that have their own unique logins, that sort of, have their own UI, UX, their own, most importantly, their own invoices that come every month, which you have to pay to keep using them. So in order to help businesses not use any of that, Odoo is the solution. So, it keeps things simple.
And to speak to the user-friendly nature, you came to the company as a user, right? You were at a different company and stumbled into Odoo. Tell us about that, and then how you transitioned to actually, starting a position with the company.
Yeah, sure. So simple. I started my software sales career at NetSuite. Was selling finance and accounting software into the software vertical. I was using the CRM that NetSuite had us using, which was, of course, NetSuite CRM. Didn't provide as much visibility into the deal flow and, where your deals were and things like that as the sales reps necessarily wanted, or at least as I wanted. So a lot of the sales reps, diverted and started to use Excel to manage their deals, the status of the deals, the next steps, things like that. And I was like, well, this seems kind of funky. I'm like, there's got to be something on the market that could, we could fire up, at a super low cost, if not for free, and, manage this with. So I started to dig around and stumbled across, Odoo. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I click on it, I'm like digging through it, and I fire up the free trial, and it turns out I could have one app for free. So I'm like, okay, perfect. I'm like, we don't have to pay anything. I'm like, great. So, and it's a CRM. And I found that, wow, this is really working well. I'm like, this is incredible. This is a fantastic piece of technology. And I started to dig around even further into this and saw what else they were doing with their different apps across the different, layers of the business, and became fascinated with it on an intellectual level, and really started to tinker and toy around with it. And so much so that I'm like, okay, I gotta go work here. This is just, the hobby needs to merge with the career. And that's sort of what sparked the, that's what sparked the engine that, has turned into my career here at Odoo.
And the company's headquartered in San Francisco, is it?
So our US HQ is in San Francisco. Our global HQ, really the mothership, is in Belgium, and a little bit outside of Brussels.
And just recently relocated to Buffalo, which is the conceit of this conversation. So you grew up in Buffalo, moved away, and now are back with the company's expansion. And you helped build the business case with your internal team for Buffalo to bring this expansion here. How did that conversation go? And how does Buffalo rise to the top of that list when you're starting to have the conversation, dive into the data, make a list of criteria, and eventually make a decision?
Yeah, so I'll start from where I think it makes sense to start here. So the conversation started almost a year ago now, where I was looking to grow inside the company, and I was actually on my way to go to Germany to open a subsidiary there for the company. My wife is from Austria, so I was figured out we'll align with family on that side of the world, and I'll tune up my German, and we'll have a great career opportunity all while there. So that was the plan, and about 6 months ago, my CEO contacted me and just said, "Hey, like, what are your thoughts on looking at different ways to help us scale here in the US instead of heading off to Germany?" And I said, "Oh, okay, well, let's see, what do we mean by that?" And really the conversation boiled down to, we need to find a city that is going to allow us to scale faster. And we're going to do that by lowering costs. We're going to do that by lowering our churn of employees, or what I'm going to call our retention rate. We need to, keep the retention as high as possible. And we need to go to a place where we have an abundance of resources to access as we grow, which is usually defined by universities, right? Because those are producing young individuals, talent that we can then recruit and we can use to scale our company. So I started to really poke around. The idea was, let's do it on the East Coast. I was in New York at the time, and we didn't want to go to New York. It was just crazy expensive, and it's going to defeat the purpose. And again, in San Francisco, we were faced with these challenges. And as I mentioned, going from 0 to 100 employees is one challenge, but going from 200 to 1,000, while logistically it might be easier internally, given given the you've already kind of cooked the operations and the processes, and you have a structure, a framework to depend on in order to scale it. But the costs are going to surmount in a large way in those cities. So it wasn't necessarily the plan 100% going forward. So we started to reevaluate some other cities on the East Coast, and in that we were looking at like Tampa, Minneapolis, even Boston, Pittsburgh, DC, and we started to look at what do these cities need to possess in order for us to combat the issues that I just mentioned. Again, to refresh your memory: cost of living, retention, access to resources. So we started doing what anyone would do. I looked, at each city. I looked at, universities. How many students are there graduating year over year? How many students in total? What degrees are they graduating with? How many STEM students are graduating across all the universities in the area? Is the city growing, or is it declining in terms of population? How about for the population between 18 to 40, growing or declining? What is the cost of living? How does it compare to the national average? How does it compare to San Francisco or to New York? How much does someone need to make here in one of these tier 2 cities, for example, in order to live a similar standard of living according to like another larger city? You start to look at geography. How well are we situated to accommodate the East Coast cities that we do the most business in, right? Cleveland, Detroit, New York, Boston, like I mentioned. And how about even into Canada? What does it mean to be close to Canada? Well, we're Belgian. We're a French-speaking company. We cater to a lot of French-speaking parts of Canada. Interesting. San Francisco is a long way from Montreal, but what cities might be well positioned to help us accommodate that little segment? And then, of course, you want to look at community. What is the community of these cities like? Where can we go where, we're not going to be shunned out, but instead we're going to be accepted with open arms, where we can really dig in and, contribute not just to the growth of our company, but have an impact on the community as a whole, where we can work with universities, where we can work with, like the private and the public sector, in order to get behind a mission that's just greater than the individual, greater than the company, but, more at the humanity level. And that's, when you factor all those things in, a lot of cities are going to fall to the wayside. And the one city that didn't was Buffalo. It really shined through in all the areas that I just talked about. And, it was an affordable place to do business. It does give us access to 70,000 plus university students in the area, and, over 200,000 within like, I think a 200-mile radius. It does position us nicely both to accommodate Canadian markets and US markets, and more specifically East Coast markets. There are not a lot of other software companies here that are getting large sums of money handed to them every other week, where we have to worry about them poaching our employees and, in messing around with our retention rates, which, interrupts our ROI. So, right, we started to break it all down. And this was the conversation that I then went into with my CEO. I said, look, like, the fact that I'm from here aside, look at the numbers. What do you got? Like, am I nuts, or are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because I'm seeing opportunity. I'm seeing what's his name? Seth, I forget the actor's name, but it reminded me of Moneyball. right? In Moneyball, there's a scene where he's hired, and on his first day, he says, Billy, I'm convinced that we can build a winning team on this budget. And we're going to do it by not focusing on the unjustified negative biases associated with players or with cities. We're going to do it by instead finding value where no one else does. And Buffalo for too long has been a city associated with all the wrong things: beer, parties, chicken wings, table drops at the Bills games. And it's that era, I think it's got to be over. We have everything else to justify the next step in our evolution as a city. We have the universities, we have the culture, we have the community, we have the architecture, the city design, we have the history, we have the people, we have we have it all. And this was more or less the vision that I had in coming here, and that my company also had, and that we got behind. And that's really what put us here. I hope that gives you some idea of how we got here.
Yeah, that's an incredible and perfect story. And as a big baseball fan, I really appreciated the Moneyball reference.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just kind of laid out what most people's perception of Buffalo typically is, with the snow and the chicken wings and, the Bills drought and all of that. So you dig into the numbers, and you said, you got to walk into your CEO's office and ask, am I crazy? What was the initial reaction, and how long did it take for them to come around to the idea where you are today in Seneca Tower, creating this expansion?
It not very long at all. It was, I think it was like interesting. And it was an email that I got back. It was just very interesting. I'll be in San Francisco in a few weeks. We'll talk then. And that was more or less, I assume, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks went by. And then obviously, at the company level, we had to get everyone on board. But generally speaking, it really, the numbers were what they were. All the work was done. There was no more selling, right? Like it didn't need to be sold. It was already, it honestly, and this, I've been calling it a solution city. It's a solution city. It's a city where it's when you peel back the first layer of BS, it's very easy to see how incredibly valuable and how big of an asset this city could be to a company. It's like I mentioned all the things, the cost of living, everything. Like it was a pretty quick turnaround, and the conversation kind of, I think in middle of end of February is when I saw the light. I'm like, okay, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And not too long after that, I was already planning to relocate back.
Yeah, so it's been public now for a couple of weeks. You guys are going into Seneca One Tower, which obviously is experiencing an amazing redevelopment, and really is kind of symbolic for the entire city. Not just that it's, our tallest building, but that for so long it was empty and now has such new life. And I know, right before we hit record, you were telling me about, buying a house. You're in North Buffalo. So how's the transition been thus far, both, for the office and for yourself?
Yeah. So on a personal level, the transition's pretty seamless. I mean, I got great parents who just helped, create a landing pad for me and my wife for when we came back home. And obviously with the pandemic, it was a little tight being stuffed up with them for a few weeks, but we were on the house hunt well before we landed here. And we just recently, bought a house, and we're setting roots down for sure. And it goes to say, another really important angle here is, if you're young and you're interested in getting yourself in a good financial situation, and you want to create a future for yourself, you don't want to pay $3,000 a month in rent to a landlord in New York City in order to be close to the bars that you frequent, where you go and spend even more money every week. If you're looking to really establish a foundation, Buffalo, it's an incredible city to do it. It's just right. It's affordable. Right. You can do it. You don't need $550,000 in the bank in order to kickstart the engine. You can do it in a much, it's about getting started, right? What do they say? It's easy to make it's really hard to make your first, 100, but once you do that, it's, easier to make your million, or whatever they say. So it's something to consider. But so from a personal standpoint, simple, fun, even to
Right.
cruise around the neighborhoods and look at homes and whatnot. But
And
professionally, go on.
Well, and to that point too, just it's a good point, because just this week we for our Be in Buffalo site, we launched a cost of living calculator that folks can poke around on, and exactly what you said about, rent prices in New York or San Fran versus Buffalo, and it even breaks down what's your grocery bill, what's the 6-pack of beer cost, what's your transportation costs. So I just want to encourage people listening to take your point and actually put it in practice. Go to the website and check some things out. But please continue on the office as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I was toying around with the calculator, but it's super valuable. So as far as the office goes, yeah, it was. I mean, once I saw what like Jamal and Douglas Development and all those guys, Heidinger, Paul Milstein, Greg Baker, like when all the work that they were putting in and the mission that they were on, it was just like, that was where you got to get right. Like you got to get behind that energy. You don't want to confront it. You don't want to in any way inhibit it. Like everyone's going towards the same goal. So I wanted to be downtown. I wanted to be in the middle of it all. I wanted to, take what I had and to contribute it to the pot, because, when tide rises, so do all ships. And that's what we need to do. That's the way we got to think here. And that was, a pretty easy decision for us. It was, there's tons of other great neighborhoods, but at the end of the day, it's much bigger than that. It's much bigger than just where am I going? What lease am I signing for the next 3 years? It's, what do we want to create here, and where do I go to most effectively do it?
You've spoken a lot to the talent available here, the university ecosystem. What are your goals for the Buffalo expansion as far as hiring? How many people do you want to have on board? And what should someone listening that might be interested in a position know?
Sure. So kind of give you the breakdown. High level, over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to be between 200 and 300 people. Those are the hiring targets we're up against. Even with the pandemic and whatnot happening, obviously still subject to interpretation as the story unfolds, but that's where we're at right now. Positions for year one, we're looking to bring on anywhere between 20 and 25 people, and that is going to include primarily 2 roles, right? Account executives or sales roles, as well as BSAs or business systems analysts. So these are people who implement the software. We're really going to be hiring for those 2 positions. At the moment, we're just hiring account executives. We're taking things one project at a time, get the foundation laid, right? Make sure the framework is perfect, and then build the superstructure on top. We're not going to cut any corners. We're not going to bite off more than we can chew. We're going to do it right every step of the way. And, in that you need patience, and we have it. We know what the long-term goal is, and we're going to get there. So 70% year over year is what we should expect. To give you an idea, if we do 25 year one, you're going to be around 40 year 2, you're going to be around 60, 65 year 3, you're going to be around, over 100, 110 year 4, you're going to be around 200 year 5, just to give you an idea of high level numbers. I know that math isn't perfect, but I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Right. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we're super lucky to have you in Buffalo, have this expansion, and the value of kind of a local champion on an expansion team like yourself. And we've seen the story over and over again. That cannot be understated. So, thanks for going to bat for Buffalo.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Couldn't be happier to be home. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So really quick, before we let you go, we always end on a blizzard round, a couple hard-hitting journalistic questions. If you were a flavor of ice cream, what would you be?
Vanilla.
Okay, TV show.
I'll vanilla, because I'll give you my explanation.
Okay.
It's a humble flavor. It has humility. It doesn't necessarily stand out, but it hits hard.
Great. A good explanation. Better explanation. Better that you explained it than just left it at vanilla. People would have filled in the blanks. All right. Book or TV show that you'd recommend?
Book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Text or phone call?
Text.
Bills or Sabres?
Sabres.
Hiking
My
or
dad.
skiing?
I'll give you some context there. My
Yep.
father, growing up, my father owned a hockey rink, and he loves hockey, and I've just grown up around hockey my whole life, and I think it's an amazing sport. And I'm even looking to jump into a league. So if anyone knows one, let me know. But I'm looking to jump into a league while I'm here. So Sabres. That's why I go that direction.
An amazing hockey town as well. Hiking or skiing?
Hiking. I'm too afraid to mess my knees up, and I love running too much in the summer to ever impose the risk of skiing.
And last question, most important, chicken wings, drumstick or flat?
Flat, loaded with blue cheese, barbecue.
Barbecue. Great pick. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bell Ringer is a podcast by Invest Buffalo Niagara, the region's privately funded, nonprofit marketing and economic development organization. Please rate this podcast, follow our social media channels, and read our blog at buffaloniagara.org for the best of Buffalo Niagara. Come grow your business with us.